to Opening to Wonder. I'm Kelly Groom. Thank you so much for joining us and supporting the Fine Arts Work Center. Tonight, we are thrilled to have Jacolby Satterwhite with us. Opening to Wonder was created in 2020 as a virtual series of conversations on the creative process to help keep our community connected and to provide crucial support for the Work Center. All of our presenters are donating their time, giving a gift to the Work Center, which has been a gift to writers and artists for over 50 years. A special thank you to our spring advisory group who created our new series on the visual arts, Esteban Del Valle, Bert Yarborough, and Kate Clark, all of whom are Fine Arts Work Center Fellows and members of the Visual Arts Fellowship Committee. Our Opening to Wonder advisors also appear as special guests throughout the series. And tonight we are so glad to have Esteban Del Valle with us to introduce our presenter. Thank you so much, Esteban.
Thank you very much, Kelly and Naya. I've been looking forward to this evening since we first started trying to figure out which artists we would bring to share their work with the Work Center community and hopefully some new friends. Jacolby was on the top of a lot of our list, but especially on the top of my list. Jacolby Satterwhite was a visual arts fellow at the Work Center in 2011 to 12, and then again in 12 and 13. He received his BFA from the Maryland Institute College of Arts in Baltimore and his MFA from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. Satterwhite's work has been presented in numerous exhibitions, including most recently at the Fabric Workshop and Museum in Philadelphia, Pioneer Works in New York, Whitechapel Gallery in London, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Minneapolis Institute of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, and the Fondation Louis Vuitton in Paris. He was awarded the United States Artists Francie Bishop Good and David Horvitz Fellowship in 2016. His work is included in the collections of the Museum of Contemporary Art Kiasma in Helsinki, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Studio Museum in Harlem, and the Whitney Museum of American Art, also in New York, among others. In 2019, Satterwhite collaborated with Solange Knowles on her visual album, When I Get Home. I've been lucky enough to see a lot of Jacolby's work in person in several exhibitions, the Whitney Biennial, as well as his recent exhibition at Mitchell-Innes Nash. But I have a very memorable experience of seeing his You're at Home at Pioneer Works, which was curated by Gabriel Florence, which was a complete immersive environment, which included a installation of a record store in which you could purchase Jacolby's album. And then he went on to give a live performance with a group of musicians and collaborators and artists of the album. And the music was amazing. It was a wonderful album as well as an incredible art piece. And Jacolby's work like that multifaceted nature of it is the reason why I constantly think of him in the studio and also present him to my students across disciplines. He's one of my favorite working artists, and I think he's just an incredible person. And one of my fondest memories of Jacolby is from the Work Center. He's the hardest working artist I've ever met. And I remember when we were fellows together, I would only see Jacolby maybe twice a day if I was lucky. Once was when he emerged to get a sandwich from Farland. And the next was late at night. I was also a night owl, and I could always count on Jacolby to be in his studio at 3 or 4 in the morning if I needed a hand with my projects, and he would come over and lend a hand. And then I remember that we went through the entire fellowship, and Jacolby had an exhibition, so he was away, and he allowed me and my friends to use his apartment at the Work Center so some of my friends could crash. And they stayed in his room, and I went in there and I saw there was absolutely nothing in there, Jacolby, except some loose change. And I was like, wow, this guy was here for 7 months and all he did was work. And I never forget that. He's a huge inspiration in my life and in my art. So I'm very, very honored to have him here. Thank you, Jacolby.
Thank you. I'm about to cry. Because I forgot that things were that intense. I mean, it makes sense. But it's great to be reminded of it's great to be reminded of that. Thank you so much. I forgot I was that intense at the Fine Arts Work Center. So anyway, well, thank you, Esteban. I guess I'll proceed to start this talk. And let's see, I usually start with this video playing, so it's never graceful to transition, but here we go. Oh no, wait. Let me turn this off, stop share. All right, there we go. All right, so I usually like to begin my talks with this particular piece, which is a 43-minute codex called The Matriarch's Rhapsody. I created this actually, maybe, I think it was before I got into, yeah, definitely was before I got into folk. And I was using this particular piece as a sort of like codex or a conceptual focus group that allowed me to kind of pick performance scores out from, or pick objects or themes from to generate my videos. But maybe I should proceed to tell you more about the history of the drawings on the left and how it relates to the objects in the middle and the video on the right. And so basically, what you're looking at are schematic diagrams on the left that were created by my mother, Patricia Satterwhite. When I was a kid, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia and had this sort of delusion that she was an inventor, like a Da Vincian inventor. But the drawings at first were like very formal and had color or whatever. And my dad would give her lots of amazing drawing utensils and stuff. And that's kind of what inspired me to make art, because I wanted to use her crayons and markers and glitter markers or whatever. But she told me in order to, work with her utilities, I had to learn how to draw. And so it became this sort of like, not really a collaboration, because I really didn't help her. I just was drawing in the room with her, but it was a way to kind of spark my fuel to create, really. And eventually I stopped, and she kept going. And then when her schizophrenia progressed, the drawings became more abstract, and the words in the schematic diagrams started having double entendre, kind of like language riffs. She was kind of like a Gertrude Stein poem or something. And I kind of ignored her practice and went on to art school and studied painting for 10 years, like from undergrad to grad school and a few residencies. But when I was ending undergrad and ending grad school, or beginning grad school, I felt like I was really sick of the conversation around it was just the interesting around the conversation around paintings that were having were not interesting to me. And I felt like I had much more to say in regards to like dimension wise, like not more to say than painting, but more to say something it couldn't fit into a frame. Or I felt like the kind of space I needed to create this kind of thing that I need to create. And so I kind of started doing performance art. I started studying Dada and Fluxus and stuff like that, and looking how they used to use performance scores. And it made me think of my mother's drawings. And so I went to South Carolina and I got the drawings and I considered the performance scores. And I used to make these haphazard like videos with a Walmart point and shoot camera of me performing. Probably something in the Fine Arts Work Center portfolio that I sent was from that body of work, but it was my way of, I was thinking like, how can I like, bring the origin of my own art craft into my actual lexicon, into my work. Eventually I went to Skowhegan and I started to see everybody they teaching themselves many different softwares and being like, Skowhegan kind of like, so can I have to shut the door because I'm being a little distracted. Hold on. Sorry about that. So when I was in Skowhegan, everyone was kind of working, like teaching themselves how to use Arduino boards and like just a lot of interactive media. Just everyone had a lot of agency over change, and they were like, people were shifting and destroying things, and nothing was precious about their art practice. And no one was kind of doing the careerist move where you're just trying to make a portfolio. And it really inspired me to take risks. So I started teaching myself softwares like After Effects and stuff, and eventually, and doing crazy performances, eventually figuring out ways to integrate the software into my performances. And I felt like I had more of a tactile relationship with my art again, where closer to getting back to painting, you know. And eventually I figured out through my trial and error with the software, I found this software Maya, which is this 3D animation software they use to make Toy Story animations, like Pixar animations and stuff like that. And I discovered that in the program, you could trace and draw. You could trace the drawings, and you can make vector lines or curves that are digital, and you can make them into objects. And I realized I can build my mother's drawings exactly how they look on the page, and I can make this sort of pastoral concert tableau, like a Titian painting, or like a Pier della Francesco painting. Like I can make these compositions with these drawings, put figures in them. And I just had, it was a big aha moment, you know? And so eventually but let me just pull up another video to show what happened next. So I made this video, Country Ball 1989, afterwards, where I realized, like I wanted, I've been looking at this home video my whole life. Hold on. So basically the home video is a Mother's Day cookout from 1989. And at first I saw a lot of things about my queer identity in it, because it shows me as a child performing and wanting to be with my female cousins all the time. I was thinking about the post-structuralist kind of ideas about it. Then eventually I start thinking about how it actually mimics an African history in Nigeria and Gelede masquerade culture, where people in Nigeria and from, you know, like in the hundreds of years ago, or even now, the customs still remain where they celebrate the Queen Mother through dance, ritual, performance, and writing, and song, and craft. And so I felt like, since this was rhyming with that, and that's what I just kept focused concept. I was like, this home video, there's something magical here. And then I realized it was ultimately the objects in this video were the same objects my mother were drawing. And I realized her schematic diagrams were just like memoirs through animism, through objects. And I realized they were scores of her memories. And I realized that I could find 30 drawings of recreational American utilitarian, like recreational American, sorry, let me lose my train of thought. Like recreational tools or whatever, like KFC buckets or carousels or pools or Jeep cars, or you know, like all the things that would exist in this camcorder footage, I could find in the drawings and composite into Maya 3D. And then I can also sew these costumes in the color within the color palette of the video, and I basically can have an agency over this event. But what I achieved in it was that it starts out like, you know, it starts out with my obsession of making pastoral concert paintings, sort of like the Titian painting or the Manet paintings. And then as it proceeds, I kind of repurposed that home footage. It's just like a re-performance, you know. Sorry, I'm stumbling, but I was also thinking about performance at the time was kind of being collected by museums, like Marina Abramovich was selling performance certificates of authenticity to museums, and that kind of conversation was happening around that time. And I was kind of like, this is interesting that I'm kind of like sort of minting or certificating my like family's home footage as a performance score that you can re-perform. But anyway, as the video proceeds to move on, I kind of shift the narrative where it starts out with folly, and then my character in the video sort of burns it all down. It's sort of like the demise of capitalism, and or like how capitalism can, like it's like a, I don't know. It's really kind of goes in this weird direction that that sounds sort of like a dissent. So what I like about this end of this video is that it ends with this giant figure consuming the entire space. And then you can see like, a constellation of that event. It took me 30 days to rotoscope that camcorder footage. But this is my family. So it's like a mirror memory, a constellation of path, kind of like the drawings that we saw. So after Country Ball, I got invited to, not after Country Ball, after Fine Arts Work Center and after doing a few more residencies, I got invited to be in the Whitney Biennial. And by that time, I was on this new series called Reifying Desire, which I was working on Reifying Desire at Fine Arts Work Center. I was like on I'd made Reifying Desire 4 and 5 at Fine Arts Center. And so I finished Reifying Desire 5 at Fine Arts Work Center, and then I went back to New York, and I think I did like the Recess residency. And Stuart Comer hit me up. I never met this guy before, but he hit me up in an email without a studio visit. He invited me to be in the Whitney Biennial in that October. And so I was freaking out. Like, what am I going to do? And I thought, I'm going to make how I'm going to make Reifying Desire 6. And so I'm going to show you. So basically, Reifying Desire was a 6-part series that basically was a suite of gestation cycles, animated, kind of shift going into like each gestation cycle, like a life cycle would go into the next chapter. And the reason why I chose gestation cycles was obviously a pun of the matrilineal kind of focus of the work, where I'm like deriving the space from my mother, but also a gestation cycle because if you think about animation is always started with like learning how, like when people teach people when you're a beginner studying animation at CalArts or some school that teaches animation, I'm sure the first thing in the classroom they do is like make a flip book of a flower growing out of the ground or a flower dying, and it's always like the most basic and banal sense of movement and animating movement is life. And so I thought that was kind of like my go-to for that was kind of my motif for the series. And so with Reifying Desire 6, I think the final gestation cycle had to be big because I wanted to be in this Whitney show. And I was just like, well, let me think about how can I really make this not an anticlimactic series. And so I thought about like, it was 2014. And Truvada was kind of, Truvada was available to the public, which is a medication that prevents HIV. And it kind of changed gay culture and I started to think about how like bareback sex was something that was vilified, and actually like there were porn stars that were considered bad influences over like the gay, just gay people, whatever. And I wanted to choose the most notorious porn star to be my gestation cycle in Reifying Desire 6. So I found Antonio Biaggi and we became friends. And then I asked him to be in this film. And he plays this kind of like father, and I'm the mother, and he inseminates me, and I have a kid in the end. It's really irreverent and goofy, but it was kind of like it was a really weird queer approach to kind of like ending the series. But also that formally the series sort of is about observation and landscape, where this scene is on the West Coast at Marin County when I was in residency at Headlands. And but most of the video most of the videos in New York City, the live action scenes. And what I do with the live action scenes, I kind of like allow the live action scenes to influence how I animate and construct the space. So I'll like look at the footage and then use my visual vocabulary and 3D animation to try to make a surrealist version of those landscapes in New York City, which you'll see after this scene. But this scene has nothing to do with New York City, obviously. But, oh, let me turn the music on. So cutting that video off. Is my thing frozen? Okay, here we go. So basically, after that video, I got San Francisco, after the Whitney Biennial, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art offered me a 2-year kind of like residency, sort of. Well, it was like a grant thing, but I kind of would go to SF MoMA like 6 or 7 times. And a couple of them were for performances over the course of 2 years. But I was given this grant to make a new performance series that, you know, could be sculptural and have artifacts with it. And so I decided to create a virtual reality visual album using the sound recordings made by my mother when she was at home and at the mental hospital. These recordings were acapellas that were like, she wrote over 155 acapellas on cassette tape. I mean, I'm not sorry. She wrote 155, she recorded 155 acapellas on cassette tape, and I decided to make an electronic record with Nick Weiss. Okay, let me share the screen. So it took me 5 years to finish the series. And the biggest exhibition for the series was at the Fine Arts Work Center and at Basel, Switzerland. Basically, I kind of, by the end of the project, I finished the album and I finished the VR and the film, and it became a feature-length film project. And you can see this neon sign with the track list. And I basically made an exhibition that was sort of like a record release party, which is kind of funny. And here you see like, I made like a Tower Record store that, you know, that held the album. And I also had like these cabinets or shrines, or like geometric abstract kind of like sculptural grids on the wall that kind of mimic the schematic diagram style of my mother's drawings and had 3D prints of her drawings placed on them, along with videos that on the shelves. Each cabinet is sort of thematic, so the videos on the shelves like go with a theme. Like I don't know, this cabinet's called American Dream. This cabinet's called Shrines for Drug Designs. This is a installation of my hour and 20-minute series Birds in Paradise, which is basically scored by the album. And then there's another version that you can play on virtual reality with different chapters. This is the room with my mother's drawings, and you can listen to her raw acapellas on this. And these are lyrics for the album. This is the album. These sculptures I did at the Fine Arts Work Center at the same time of that show. They were referencing my mother's drawings, but like it helped me, allow me to think about different kind of just ways of carving out space. This one's called Room for Cleansing. This sculpture is 8 feet tall, and it's called Room for Doubt. It's based on Caravaggio's Doubting Thomas, which is an allegory about skepticism, and it was used in the church in the 16th centuries to promote ritual and faith. And I love the allegory for many different reasons, but one thing about it is I put this performance footage of me from that. Just like I recorded this like 8 years ago, but I'm covered in 7 layers of paint, and I have a Xerox of many different viruses on the floor for 20 feet, a 20 feet catwalk of Xerox viruses like HIV and SARS and all these kinds of viruses and whatever. And I use my body as a redaction tool. My body is erasing it with all the paint. So it's like an antibody. It's really funny. It's funny that I released it in 2020, like the sculpture. Room for levitating beds, room for ascension. So I think I'm gonna play, how much time do we have? Because I wanna figure out what I'm gonna play.
You've got about like 30.
Okay, good.
Yeah, good time.
So I think I wanna play, I I'll play an excerpt of We Are in Hell When We Hurt Each Other, and then Shrines. So you can understand how the vocals and the line. So in 2020, So in 2020, obviously we all had the craziest year ever. The pandemic made it really, really hard to make art. And I was I didn't know, I had my first solo show at my gallery at Mitchell-Innes Nash. And it was, in October, and I didn't know if people were going to even get to see the show or if anyone would care because of the pandemic and the race war thing in the summer thing, that thing that happened with George Floyd. It was like people were marching outside of my apartment. I was going to protest and I was recording a lot of things on my phone. I was building this archive of basically to inspire, like I could not respond to my environment. So I kind of decided to make this piece based on and use my mother's song We Are in Hell When We Hurt Each Other and 5 other tracks from the album to score it. And I titled it We Are in Hell When We Hurt Each Other. It's just kind of irreverent. And so you'll see, so here's the video. Oh, basically the video is, it's a suite of vignettes that show these Black female figures that are sort of immune to all threats in the space, all viruses, all, anything that comes at it. It's like an autonomous figure. And it sort of presents this alternate reality where they're safe. And so that's kind of where I went thematically. And so I'm just gonna let it play.
Honey, you will never be alone. When you see me, honey, you will be at home. Honey, baby, you will be at home. You will be at home. You will be at home, not alone. Honey, baby, you're at home. You're not alone. You're at home. Honey, baby, you're at home. You're not alone. You're not alone. Honey, baby, you're at home. You're not alone. You're at home. Honey, baby, you're at home. You're not alone. You're not alone. You're not alone. You're at home. You're not alone. You're at home. Where I used to be, I will never be again. With all of those lies I've seen, to a world where lies are the theme, and there's no difference, you see. I'll never go back. I'll never go back. I'll never go back. Never go. Never go back. 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 I'll never go.
And I want to share one more film, the final film from the series, and I want to share it in whole. It's only like 10 minutes, but it's a new piece that I've made. It's premiered at the Gwangju Biennial this month, and it's going to exhibit at Haus der Kunst in June through January, and at Athens Biennial in this fall, and maybe Studio Museum in Harlem AIR show. So you kind of have a little sneak peek of something that is not premiered in the US yet. So I'm excited to share with you.
I'm gonna dish you right now.
If you hurt me, you hurt you, you hurt yourself. We all hurt me, you hurt you, you hurt yourself. We all in hell when we hurt each other so. When we pass from this way, we'll still exist.
and the half communicator between the two. Some people are just the genius performers.
Where's Esteban's question? Hold on a minute.
Am I on?
He asked you your question. Many of your pieces combine dance and voguing. Wait, this is the.
Hey, Jacolby, can you see me?
This is hard.
I brought Esteban on stage.
Okay. Well, so the first question I asked, I accidentally posted in just the panelist section. So I reposted it in attendees, but I'll just read it real quick. In a recent talk from an exhibition of another former fellow and next week's guest, Angela Dufresne's work, the conversation about her large paintings brought up Michael Fried's writings about absorption and theatricality, where Fried argues that whenever a self-consciousness of viewing exists, absorption is compromised and theatricality results. Knowing you are a passionate student of painting and art history, I was wondering if you could talk about absorption and theatricality as it relates to the concept of the immersive versus the interactive in the digital and virtual space and the evolution of the viewer to the user.
That is the most difficult question I have ever presented in my life. I know.
Well, just
I really
to have that conversation further, I guess, one thing me and you have talked about is like, while people see your work as very much based in this virtual space and this interactive, you are a student of painting. That's how you started, and a lot of your references are painting based. I guess I also know that as you move from just projection and to installation and then ultimately virtual reality, there's this whole other shift of the viewer's experience, and where the viewer becomes a participant, and you have this long relationship to video games and the idea of the user versus the viewer. I think, like in that space where your art still functioning within painting language becomes interactive and or immersive. Like, I think immersive means you can get lost in it. I think interactive, there's something interesting about how interaction is, in theory, supposed to be more immersive, but the self-consciousness of the fact that one is like a lot of interactive stuff can be really corny, Like,
Mhm.
it's like, oh, grab this thing and then this happens. And, you know, it's like, how is that immersive? So I think it's a bigger conversation about the evolution of art as we move into NFTs and
Mhm.
how even pop culture, like I just saw Little Nas's video and I was like, that looks like Jacolby. They stole Jacolby stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. I mean, I was supposed to do something with him in November, but he was in LA. And it's funny that that came out after he was solicited to work with me, but he took all the things that I don't like about myself anyway, so for my work, and he kind of used them in a way that it's not aligned with the metaphors that I was thinking of. So that's cool, but I think it's cool. So about immersive and interactivity, I actually interactivity is very important conceptually. That's the reason why I wanted to make a virtual reality album, because I was thinking about like a gestalt theory within an object. Like I was thinking about first of all, I was thinking about how could I bring the object back to the listening experience in an era where everything is streaming and digital. And, you know, people make vinyls or 8-tracks or cassette tapes to be like nostalgic, but I was thinking an album could be a virtual reality album where the viewer has to listen to the album 12 times because the album scores the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis differently. So it's kind of like a Rashomon experience where you can look at this direction of my virtual reality pieces. And I'm talking about my virtual reality pieces, which are, I didn't show that on the, during the talk, but the virtual reality pieces are basically the same as the videos, and you can kind of actually see what's going on everywhere. And I kind of try to make sure all the axis points have a certain narrative for you to consume. And so therefore the viewer is the viewer is a participant, and the viewer becomes an object when they wear the VR headset. Also just kind of like the people in the work, actually, like my live performance stuff. I mean, when I do like green screen parties and photo shoots, that's sort of an art piece in itself, and it's interactive, like the construction of the videos. Like when I had a major party at the Standard Hotel that lasted from 7 at night to 8 in the morning, and I put my green screen up and in the party, and we had like it was kind of corporate because Grindr sponsored it, and the Standard, I forgot, Grindr and something else, but it was at Standard, Visionaire, and they hired these women to carry poppers on the trays. It was just like they made it debaucherous and put liquor in the jacuzzi and with paper bags, because I was like making this space that was, I actually had a digital wallpaper that looked like Central Park that I created in the hotel room. And because the show was about cruising and gay apps. And so I thought, what if I made this kind of weird, I thought I was getting to the point. I made a space for digital art production as a like sort of radical relational aesthetics performance piece, and people were able to record themselves, wearing all these costumes and outfits, doing these performance gestures that kind of like went into a much more transgressive space because everyone got drunk and it was a ragey party. And so I kind of like had, footage of over 100 people, and I kind of used it in a lot of pieces. They became the participants in my actual world of labor the carnality. I don't know if that, huh?
No, I was just gonna say, I think that's what's really interesting about your work in regards to that question I asked, is that there's a point in certain things, and as you talk about in voguing or in gay culture, where theatricality becomes immersive, and you can be absorbed in theatricality, which is something that Freed kind of poses as like polar opposites or can't, so like that's what led me to the question of things like you combine dance and voguing to create something that could be seen as a form of like martial arts at times. And I was wondering if you could talk about that theatricality and or the dancing voguing as a form of like defense.
Well, no, that's kind of formalist. The dancing, I adopted some of the forms of voguing based on just histories with all kids and being in that scene when I was a teenager or whatever. But I kind of, the modern dance and the martial arts and the voguing kind of movement aesthetic that I kind of use constantly in the work is more so about the fact that like I am miming these objects based in from my mother's drawings. Like I'm doing a pill, and I need a very interesting way to like do that variation. So when I'm on a green screen, I'm thinking about how many ways can I like do how many ways can I use this banal object and make it look good in a video? But like also just thinking about how can I move in a way that when you freeze the frame, it'll look like a Renaissance painting every time, like a Pier della Francesca painting, where they have like the figures doing this and this, you know, like it gave me room to kind of, you know, kind of doing that movement on the green screen really invites some, it really invites, it lends to a really amazing composition. And I usually make C prints first before I make the film. Like I'll like make these, I'll make a compositional tableau of a scene, of a landscape with the figures, and they kind of look like crazy Hieronymus Bosch paintings. And I'll make 8 of those to find the general motif that I'm going to use so how am I going to bridge these images together? That's how I animate, that's how I storyboard. And so like the voguing is, and the dance and all the movement is used that way because it's me miming the usage of objects, so I can like rotoscope the objects onto my hand digitally. Like I'll put a 3D animated object and it looks like I'm doing something. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense. Kind of
no, it definitely does. I'm gonna field some other questions from people. Vicky Tomeko asks, do you have other people working for you, or do you do everything yourself?
Oh, I still do everything myself. Well, the fabric workshop I had, like the people in shop, we worked together to fabricate the sculpture stuff. But all of my paintings, I'm making paintings now for the Studio Museum in Harlem, AR show, so making those by myself, obviously. And my videos, yeah, I still make them by myself. I'm doing I'm doing kind of a visual album, sort of, for Perfume Genius, this music artist. And I'm animating it by myself still. I think we're hiring a DP in LA to shoot the green screen stuff, but like, yeah. Well, still working alone.
That leads to Rob's question of how important is it for you to be involved in every part of the technical process of production, instead of removed in an art director way?
It's just because it's hard for me to. I'm just that kind of artist. I went to Fine Arts Work Center, so clearly I'm an autonomous, like solo loner person. I mean, the way I make art is alone. Like, I don't know. It's about solid. I just don't know how to do it. I kind of get panicked. Even when I was at Pioneer Works and we were working on those things, delegating things makes me panic because I'm changing my mind about so many variations. So I just kind of like, the thing about making art that makes me happy is just the ability to change my mind and move things around and to like get to lose myself, because sometimes I live in my head, you know? So
well, that's perfect segue into Kate's question, which was, there's always been an enormous amount of happening in your universe, but now there seems to be an incredible amount of detail on top of that universe. Are you faster at creating, or are you taking even more time with each piece?
Not faster on antidepressants, so I can work faster. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for 10 years, doing this kind of work. So
one thing, I was going to say, one thing I've noticed is the reoccurring theme of doubting Thomas, which appears in several of your films, but each time it's rendered like more. That was like the last one you just showed, it was like even more rendered than the very first time I ever seen you use that motif.
Oh yeah, I know. I kind of sick of that reference haunts me. And it kind of like, yeah, I was about to do a painting. I was like, I saw the composition again. I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. But that's just a coincidence. It just has to do with like, I don't think I think that just has to do with the fact that like I have much more of a lucid vision. I have a lucid vision of what I'm doing. Art is about trying to do something and failing and getting up and doing it again. You're never going to get it right, so it's an endless pursuit. That's what like art is being an artist is a lifelong journey. And so I'm constantly looking for the answers within my obsessions. And so maybe that's the answer to that, like how it gets re-rendered.
Okay. We got one more question from Emerson, which is the soundtrack of the new piece going to be available to stream or purchase anywhere? So dope.
Oh, yes, on Spotify, right? It's been on Spotify for 2 years, I think now. Spotify and iTunes. My band name is Pat. But you can I think you look up Jacolby Satterwhite on Spotify and see it's because I'm like, it's on, you look up Jacolby Satterwhite or Pat. The album is called Love Will Find a Way Home. And the vinyl is on sale at the Pioneer Works website, which is a 35-page book of my performance with SF MoMA and has the 2 vinyls.
And I got one more last question for you, which is, I noticed, especially in the presentation, that your outside shots where you're performing in landscape, you never filter them, while the digital space is always like very manipulated, the lighting is controlled, and then the outside shots kind of stay as natural lighting always.
Oh, because they're guerrilla. I like when it's like, oh, I caught a candid scene. I don't know. I think it's just out of habit of like, I usually like, I'm more into the moments where I happen to have a camera and I happen to see the metaphor and I let the light take care of it. And then I go back to the city. I like that. I don't know. It's kind of a habit. It's a habit from just like the best stuff that triggers creating an animation comes from something I like discover in public when I happen to have a camera and it's the right moment and it's going to drive the work, because usually the live action scenes do drive the 3D animation in this weird way.
Well, it's funny because it reminds me of the like Constable or Turner and the historic practice of going and doing these small painting studies of a landscape moment to then go back to the studio and do an epic history painting based on those studies. It's like very similar.
Yeah, that's what it's about. Literally, that's why I had a series called En Plein Air, because that was the metaphor that I was thinking, and not metaphor, but like reference.
Oh, Naya has a question. I'm wondering how software and technology evolution has impacted your videos and the ideas for work.
It stresses me out because I've been learning like how to make video games and coding. That's hard, but I've also kind of been like, painting has been really good for me, and I'm sort of feeling like I'm moving away from it. Like I'm just taking a break, even though I have to make a lot of digital stuff for shows this year, but I feel like I'm seeing myself move away, and because it's just I just think as it evolves and gets crazier, I become less interested for some reason. But we'll see. I don't know. Currently, I'm like moving in a phase where I just like making things with my hands, just because I've made like 2 6-part series in 10 or 11 years with no break, and I needed to kind of take a step back from the computer because I have, my spine is all messed up from sitting down too long animating these things. So.
Are you at the Studio Museum this coming year?
Yeah, I'm doing a new residency there. That's for like, they call it a mid-career artist, and I'm not a mid-career artist, but they call it that because it's this whole story about I applied because I wanted to do a 180 with a new kind of body of work, and I needed a studio for free. And I loved the Studio Museum, and when I got in, it was during COVID, and so much shit was happening where I was like, I have access to too much. I have galleries and institutional visibility, and it would be kind of tone deaf for me to take this residency, so I turned it down. And I turned down the money, and they gave it to another person, and they said, well, we still want to do something with you. Maybe we can start a new residency for like artists further in their careers and call it a mid-career artist, and you wouldn't get any money, but you get all these other things, including the show at the end at PS1 MoMA, which was kind of like, so I just thought like, oh, it's a good opportunity for me to debut these paintings.
Yeah, I can't wait to see your paintings. Jacolby, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Really appreciate it. It's great to see your face, great to see the work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you'll join us next Thursday, April 22nd, 6 p.m. Eastern, for Phantom Bodies, The Haptic Unhinged with Angela Dufresne, Melissa Ragona, Andrew Woolbright, Mala Iqbal, and Jory Minaya. Thank you again. Good night.